Aloha, I'm Eva Andrade. I'm the president and CEO of Hawaii Family Forum. And today we're going to talk about the Supreme Court issuing two landmark rulings today on religious freedom. So let's chat about that. Aloha, everybody, and welcome to our weekly show, Faith in Politics. And today I'm very excited to talk about two landmark Supreme Court rulings that was issued today, July 8th. And we have visiting us on this wonderful show today, Brittany Jones, who's one of our partners across the great United States of America from the Family Policy Alliance. Welcome, Brittany.
Thank you so much for having me, Eva. It's wonderful to share with you guys and talk about these two great rulings that reaffirm our God-given religious freedoms.
Well, I tell you what, I'm sure you feel the way I do. We had a couple of rulings that came out of the Supreme Court that were not so good. And a lot of the faith-based community were kind of like reeling with that. And then we had the Espinoza decision, which was a good decision. And then today's decisions, which it's just going to be wonderful for the people of faith. So let's start with the first one, which is Our Lady of Guadalupe versus Morrissey Baru. And again, one of the exciting things we want to share with our viewers is that this was a 7-2 ruling, both of the cases, and two of the judges who are not normally in agreement with us actually voted in favor of this. So let's talk about that first case. So give us some background and so people can kind of get on the same page.
Sure, yeah. The Guadalupe decision was a fantastic decision for religious freedom for all Americans, but it dealt with two Catholic school teachers out of Los Angeles, and they worked at different schools, but they had been let go from their positions. And they immediately sued the Catholic schools they had formerly worked for and claimed that it was employment discrimination. However, today, the court said that a court cannot interfere with the employment decisions of a church or a religious school like Guadalupe. And so that's a huge decision for the ability of churches to kind of govern the way they make decisions and their hiring and firing practices. And it also provides a lot of reassurance to a lot of conservatives who were concerned the court was going to slowly erode away their religious freedoms.
I'm sorry, Brittany. So across the nation, as many of our viewers may not know, that Family Policy Alliance has partners across the entire United States. And so this is one case that's going to bring a lot of great news across the nation. I mean, these kind of things are happening across the nation, right? Where there's been complaints. Right. So how do you think this ruling is going to affect all of that?
Yeah, I think the court was very strong today in talking about that there is an inherent right in the First Amendment. It has nothing to do with any statutes, nothing that we can that can be taken away. It's a God-given right in the First Amendment that's been recognized in the First Amendment, that a church and a religious organization have the right to govern how they make decisions. And so that affects not only the church in Los Angeles, it affects not only the school in California, but it affects a family in Hawaii who wants to send their kids to a Christian school. They can be rest assured that that school, if they claim that they're making decisions based on their religious or Christian principles, that they can make those decisions. And so your religious or faith-based school in Hawaii has the right to hire a teacher who actually agrees with their beliefs, who actually can talk about those beliefs in the classroom. And so that's a huge benefit to Hawaii families who want to send their kids to a school where they're going to learn about Jesus, where they're going to learn about the core tenets and the core morals that make Christianity such a benefit to the United States.
So do you see this being connected in any way to the Espinoza case, meaning that now that you've got these two decisions that come with parental choice and education, and now the schools are protected, right, in their hiring and firing, correct?
Yeah, so I think the Espinoza case, which is Espinoza versus Department of Montana, I think Employment Division or something like that. It's a very long name. I get them all confused. And I'm an attorney. I'm supposed to know these things. But anyway, Department of Revenue, that's what it is. So the Espinoza case out of Montana said that the government could not discriminate against the religious schools when it was basically giving money to parents. So parents could decide how they use tax credits given by the government, and they could decide to use that money at a religious school. And so this just once again reaffirms parents not only their choice, but their ability to make decisions based on their faith and to live that out. And the government can't get in the way of that. And so these two work together. So not only is the religious beliefs of the parents protected under Espinoza, but now the religious beliefs of the school are protected under Guadalupe. So these two work together to put a strong statement from the court that religious beliefs will be protected. And I think after, I don't know how many of your viewers know about the Bostic decision that came out about 2 weeks ago that dealt with employment and sexual orientation, gender identity laws. That decision was very disheartening to conservatives. We're very concerned about how that might interfere and how it will interfere with the religious beliefs of employers. But in these two separate decisions, Espinoza and Guadalupe, the court has reaffirmed that they won't stand for discrimination against religious employers. And so that's something that Hawaiians and people all across America can take to the bank. They can know that they will be protected by the court, at least in this area. And we'll continue to fight across the country to expand those protections because they are truly God-given protections, and it's something that the court should be forced to recognize.
I'm loving this. What I'm picturing in my mind is like these religious freedom bookends. Yes. You've got the parents on one end that are now they're protected, and then you've got the schools now, the faith-based schools that are protected. So now we've got this really strong protection around us. And surprisingly, these two liberal justices actually voted in favor of this. Do you have any thoughts about that?
So Justice Kagan and Justice Breyer actually signed on to Justice Alito's opinion in the Guadalupe case, which is a huge win because they tend to be very liberal justices, but of the four liberal justices, Justice Breyer and Kagan seem to understand the idea that religion's important, that it does serve a purpose in society, and that people's faith does motivate them. And so they have tended to side with the conservatives on this issue in the past. So it's not a shocker, but it also, to some extent, is a shocker because the court's become so partisan in the last couple of years. So you're never quite sure if those kind of traditional understandings are going to hold true. So we're very excited to see Breyer and Kagan at least recognize that these are important rights that should be protected, and that the government has the ability to actually protect those rights, and that they should. And that there are areas the government shouldn't impose itself in.
That's really, really good. So is there anything that people right now who are watching this, who are excited about this, is there something they should be doing? Is there something they should be watching for?
Yeah, I think you start talking to your Christian schools and your faith-based schools in your area, and you encourage them to live out their faith, that they don't have a reason to fear, that they are protected not only by their God-given rights, but that the court has affirmed that, and they should boldly live that out. That they should hire teachers that are consistent with those beliefs, who are not only great educators, but will educate their children in the faith. And I think that's really important for people to encourage, religious schools to do, because I think it's a hard world out there. I think it is for everyone. It's a hard word for parents, a hard place for schools of all types. But especially for religious schools, they get beat up on a lot. And I think that these two cases work together to reinforce the fact that we do want religious schools to continue to thrive in our nation. They have been the backbone of our education system since the beginning. And the court has reaffirmed that should go forward, and we should encourage them to continue to live that out.
We're just so happy that we were able to report some good news for a change. Yeah. I'll tell you, here in Hawaii, we've had cases where in one case, it was a Catholic school that had to release a teacher who had some issues that were not congruent with Catholic teaching. And of course, how do we deal with the fallout in the community? Because in this case that I'm referring to, what happened was the community was angered, right? Because this was a tenured teacher. And so now the Supreme Court has made this decision. How do you think people in the community that do not agree with this are going to react?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's going to be people that don't agree with this decision. There's employment decisions are very, very difficult, right? Like it's not a simple yes or no on a lot of these questions. But I think what I would hope people would understand as you talk about it is, as the court recognized in Guadalupe today, that it is so important to maintain the integrity of a religious school, right? It's so important to actually carrying out their mission. They can't carry out their mission if they can't maintain the integrity of their employees that are consistent with that mission. And while I know that's difficult sometimes to reconcile with personal feelings about a particular person, a church and a religious school does have that right. And so we should work with them and encourage them to live out that faith. And, let's work towards helping that teacher find a position elsewhere. But it is really important to maintain that integrity of that Christian school.
Absolutely. So one good win, we can check that off on something to be happy for. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in a couple of minutes. So stay tuned. Aloha, I'm Eva Andrade. I'm the president of Hawaii Family Forum, and we've been serving Hawaii's faith-based community since 1998. What we do is we provide research and education to the faith-based community to help them understand what's happening at the state capitol and what's happening on the issues that affect the families here in Hawaii. If you would like more information, please visit us on the web. But in the meantime, know that Micah 6:8 says that the Lord requires of us to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And we can help you do that, not only to raise your voice the way that the Lord calls us to raise our voice, but to understand the issues on a scriptural basis. And we'll tell you how you can learn more about what's affecting Hawaii's families. Mahalo. Welcome back. I hope you got your cup of coffee and you're ready to hear the second good piece of good news that we're giving you in today's show. And again, we want to thank Brittany Jones from the Family Policy Alliance, who is an attorney, and she's sharing with us the good news that came out of the Supreme Court today. So the second case, Brittany, this one is a long-awaited decision. I mean, people have been reading about this case forever, and this is the Little Sisters of the Poor. And really, I want you to hash out a little bit more about this, but really, this is a case of sisters who wanted to be able to minister in the community without having the government tell them what they should be providing as far as healthcare services, abortions, contraception, and that sort of thing. So explaining to us the great news that came again with a 7-2 decision in favor of the Little Sisters of the Poor.
Yeah, so this is a case that began 7 years ago. I wasn't even in law school yet, just to be totally honest.
Oh my gosh. So were you watching this though through law school?
Yes.
I mean,
oh yes, definitely. I mean, this isn't a case, this is the third time they've been to the Supreme Court and the third time they've won. Which is ridiculous. But just to put it in some context here.
3 times the charm.
Third time, yeah. Yeah, so this is a case about an order of nuns called Little Sisters of the Poor that minister to the elderly poor in their communities. And they have given their lives to this. And they have a strong belief, as most Catholics do, that abortifacients and contraceptives are unbiblical and unscriptural. And so when the Obamacare came out in 2012, they pretty quickly issued 2010, but then they pretty quickly issued some regulations that actually required that insurers pay for contraceptives and that employers pay for contraceptives.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I mean, viewers, let's think about this. These are nuns. Regardless of what you believe in your faith, these are nuns that have taken, a promise of celibacy for one thing, right? I mean, and they're going to be forced to provide these services. It's like reasonable people have just been horrified over the last 7 years that this even came to this. So I'm so sorry. It's just it just
you're fine.
blows me away.
It's shocking because it's so clear that nuns of all people should be the ones that should be allowed to live out their faith. Like they live in a very isolated kind of world that they've created so that they can minister as best they know how. They have literally given their lives to service, and which
And
is
there's no question
huge. No,
what they believe. I mean, Catholics are very, very clear and have always
exactly.
been on how they
Yes.
feel about abortion and contraception. So I'm sorry, I'm still just blown away that we
No,
even
you're totally good. It should be emphasized because it is shocking. Like there's no question here about if their belief is sincere, if it's one that's backed up by their church, if they're even living it out properly. They're living out their belief to the letter of the law and over and above. And so this is definitely something that a court should automatically be like, oh, of course you should get an exemption. Of course you shouldn't be forced to pay for contraceptives and abortifacients. But apparently the Obama administration couldn't get there, so they had to go to court 3 times. So yeah, this case started out in 2013. When the Obama administration created some sort of exemption. It's a little weird. It's a little bizarre how it all went down, but essentially they would have to send in this letter, and the Little Sisters of the Poor's mind, that was them. They were still being forced to be complicit in paying for abortion, because essentially the government would then figure out a way to cover them or cover the women in their care with contraceptives, which just completely like goes against everything Little Sisters of the Poor stand for. And at this time, and just to refresh people's memory about what was going on at this time, you have private schools, like my own college that I was in at that time filed suit against this contraceptive mandate. You had the Hobby Lobby case going up. So there were a lot of different cases that were just screaming that the contraceptive mandate clearly violated religious freedom and shouldn't be allowed to go into effect. But the Obama administration was very slow at responding. And so the first time, all the lower courts said, oh no, the Little Sisters of the Poor actually have to pay for contraceptives. Like the government's doing everything they can, which was just not true. And so you get to the Supreme Court, and the first time the Supreme Court kind of smacks it back down, and they're like, no, this is a violation. But then they required that the Obama administration and the Little Sisters of the Poor kind of get together and try to work it out. Well, the Obama administration, the week before President Obama left office, told the court they couldn't work it out, essentially. And so then it got left to Trump's administration to figure it out. And thankfully, the new administration did issue a new exemption that provided even more coverage and more exemptions for-profit organizations and for-profit businesses, which is a huge win. But they, in line with what happened with the Hobby Lobby decision. So these were huge steps forward. Well, of course, leftists didn't like that. And so they then sued the Trump administration for this new regulation, and therefore looped Little Sisters of the Poor back into it, claiming that they still had to jump through all these hoops to get their exemption, which is an exemption that they should have just been given off the bat. So thankfully, what the court did today, after that long history, the court today was like, of course the Little Sisters of the Poor should have an exemption. Of course this regulation is constitutional. And of course the Trump administration is upholding the Little Sisters of the Poor and all Americans' right to religious freedom. And so that in itself is a huge win.
Now, very interesting. So for viewers to understand this, if you're a faith-based organization, you're a faith-based company, say like Hobby Lobby or whatever, right? Do you have to have written in your bylaws that how does one stand on this, that this is their religious beliefs? Or could just someone say, hey, I'm a believer and this is what I believe?
Yeah, the court's always held to this framework that has to be sincerely held belief, and they're not going to just grant it to anybody. So we typically, when I'm talking to people, I'm like, hey, make sure, I'm not giving you legal advice, but make sure that your bylaws do clearly outline what you believe about marriage, what you believe about life, what you believe about gender and sexuality. And so those things should be outlined because it does make it easier. But sometimes the court they'll see, oh, you're living out your faith. So let's take, for example, the example of Jack Phillips in Colorado. He was a cake baker who was going to be was trying that the Colorado was trying to force to make a cake for a same-sex wedding against his religious beliefs. Well, I don't think any of his documentation exactly spelled out exactly all of his beliefs, but he had built his business around the idea that he was a Christian and that he wanted to celebrate marriage. His wedding cake industry was built around that concept. And so I think as long as Christians are living consistently with their beliefs, the court may recognize it. Though, of course, it's better to have documentation, but the court will tend to recognize if you're living consistently.
It goes back to that saying that if you were ever put on trial for your faith in Jesus, would they be able to find enough evidence to prove, to convict you of your Christianity? So so viewers, that's the question for you as you're sitting and watching this. How deeply are your religious convictions in your life? Do you take it to your job? Are you able to do what the Lord is calling you to do without any fear? Well, today's decisions should remind you that you have the strength and power, and now you have the courts behind you, that if you have deeply held religious convictions, you are fully able to bring that into the community. So as always, we've run out of time, but we really want to thank Brittany for sharing her. In Hawaii, we call it mana'o, which is your, it's like your teaching, you're giving us your knowledge and your wisdom. So we thank you for sharing that with us today.
I love that so much. Thank you so much for having me.
And for our viewers, visit us at hawaiifamilyforum.org. We will also put the link for the Family Policy Alliance if you'd like to see some of the good work they're doing up there in Colorado Springs. In the meantime, remember, everything we do is for faith, family, and freedom. Mahalo, everybody. Hey, if you liked the video today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you will know every time we upload a new video. Mahalo.